Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but they've made a very strong name for themselves. And I think it is fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different kinds of fruity, juicy, modern, Nordic, smoothie, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers, but also for their New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. So if those are two beer categories that really interest you, this is one of the Swedish breweries that you really need to check out at the moment, in my opinion. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. It is supposed to be very nice, and it's also a style that I know these guys can do very well. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers, because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review then, we are going to return to the wonderful Fermenterarna, or the fermenters, as it would be in English. Nearly coughed on that one there. But there we go. So yeah, this particular beer is called Burrito Burrito. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this is a New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So this beer was released as part of the Lokalt Osmoskoligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for December of 2022. It was released along with the Cat Yoga, which was also a New England Double IPA, and that one was pretty nice actually. So this is our second Fermenterarna beer over December 2022. But yeah, they know how to do this style, I have to say, so it's always cool to review the new ones that they're releasing. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So yeah, you can use the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from your local area, they should pop up. Otherwise, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with a number of other things. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. We'll go on to my brewery notes and chat a little bit about Fermenterarna. So, Fermenterarna, as I've told you before, was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, who founded the company together back in 2018. So, the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västra Götaland, very close to the Norwegian border, actually to the north of Gothenburg. Supposed to be a very pretty fishing village and somewhere that I do think I would quite like to go and visit. But when it comes to the two founders, they actually had quite different journeys when it came to getting interested in beer. So apparently Niklas ordered a beer in a bar one day, without really knowing what it was. But it turned out that this was the Tropic Thunder from Duggesbryggeri, one of the really well-known Gothenburg breweries. And of course, for me, that is one of the kind of classic Swedish sour beers. And it was a collaboration with Stillwater Artisanal, beautiful beer. I really recommend that you try this one. But anyway, this really kind of showed Niklas, oh, you know, beer can be very, very interesting. And it just kind of blew his mind a little bit. And he thought, you know, we need to learn how to make this. Anna, on the other hand, actually had a long interest in things that ferment, and she ran the restaurant Coasters Trädgård, doing, you know, sauerkraut, sourdough bread, you name it. Anna has played with it and fermented it. I think she did kombucha and things like that, I'm sure I read at one point as well. So yeah, there's lots of really interesting stuff that Anna has been involved in from that sense. But they actually started out with just a very small 200 litre brew kit. Their interest in beer and fermenting things pushed them into kind of home brewing. But in late 2018, they had to take a break with the company to expand it because their beers that they took to different festivals were received very, very well. So they then moved to a new facility with two 500 litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres. And they were aiming to brew 50,000 litres over the course of 2019. But at this point, they said they actually had the capacity and equipment to brew 250,000 litres of beer per year. But over the next few years, they continued to expand and get their name out there a little bit more. And then in August of 2021, they eventually moved to a new brewery in Hisingen down in Gothenburg. They took their equipment with them, and they also got a new 3,000 litre brew kit at this time as well. They do plan to open up a restaurant and tap room at the brewery in the near future as well, so we'll need to keep an eye on that and see what happens with it over the next wee while. But as of December 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 150 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I said to you earlier, they are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their modern Nordic fruity, juicy, whatever you want to call them, sour beers. But yeah, as I say, these guys for me, one of the best probably one of the best breweries when it comes to fruity sours these days in Sweden, along with, you know, Duck Pond, Elm 11. There's a few other ones doing really good stuff as well, and yeah, one of the best New England IPA breweries just now too. So yeah, if those two beer categories of course are very, very popular at the moment, but this is a brewery, a Swedish brewery, that I do recommend you check out if you haven't done so already. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can really tell you about these guys for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a wee look at the beer itself now that we've talked about the brewery. So yeah, as you can see, the artwork on this one is very similar to what we've seen from Fermenterarna before, although you can see the skeleton guy with his burrito this time. Gold top on the can, as we quite often get from Fermenterarna. There you can see on the back, Burrito Burrito, and the Fermenterarna fermenting bottle there. But yeah, as we said earlier, this one is an 8% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. This beer was released as part of the December 2022 Lokalt Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget. And it cost me, I want to say this was 50 Swedish kronor, maybe 55. We'll go with 55. I think that sounds a bit more reasonable for a double IPA. But so 55 Swedish kronor, that is about €5.50, £5 sterling, somewhere in the region of $6 American. But yeah, it should be quite an interesting one, this. So this one is hopped with both, was it Citra? Yeah, it was Citra in both the T90 and the cryo form, and also Idaho 7 in both the T90 and cryo form. So we know these hops very well, both of them American, both 14% alpha acid. Citra's going to give you that bit of pungent passion fruit, big juicy mango, and then of course some of the other softer tropical notes too, whereas Idaho 7 for me has always been a very, very smooth hop. Lovely, very soft mango, papayas, apricots, all of these kind of things. So this one for me should be a really tropical leaning New England double IPA. We'll just need to see how it pans out though. But yeah, 440ml can this one. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting. I'm very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us, because Cat Yoga that they released this month was also very nice, and I just like trying the different things that Fermenterarna are putting out there. So yeah, let's have a wee look at this. I think that's most of it out of the can into the glass, but we'll leave a wee bit in there to pour later on. So yeah, this is poured pretty much as you would expect from a kind of modern IPA. To be honest with you, or a modern New England hazy IPA, we should say. So before the head disappears, I think we can say that this one is poured with a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head there. There's a few, you know, there's smaller bubbles down toward the bottom, but bigger bubbles up toward the top there, which looks really nice. But yeah, this is certainly one of the superior and gloopier ones that I can remember having seen from Fermenterarna. So remember, the level of haze that you get in these New England IPAs depends on the malt content that you use. You know, if usually it's the wheat and the oats that will give you most of the haziness, but the barley malt can affect it a little bit too. But it's also going to be the type of yeast that you use in these things actually. But yeah, this is certainly one of the superior and gloopier ones I remember seeing from Fermenterarna. But I get a feeling that from the colour of this beer, they might use a few different kinds of barley malt in this one. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts you use, to the length of your wort boil, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker coloured beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuvants you put in can affect the colour of your beer too. When it comes to New England IPAs though, or any type of IPA for that matter, you don't often have to care about barrel aging or adjuncts that you put into the beers. It's not common to do that with these styles. But yeah, like I say, this is one of the more kind of soupy and gloopy New England doubles that I've had, and it's also one of the more kind of rich yellow leaning ones that we've had from them as well. Actually, I would describe the colour of this one as being more akin to like a slightly mixed tropical fruit juice. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass with this one, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. It's just a very thin foamy layer on top and a nice kind of thicker ring just around the edge of the glass there. But overall, it does look pretty nice, I have to say, and nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. So yeah, interesting stuff. So let's take a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see how we get on. I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of this beer, so let's dive straight in and have a look at it. Oh yeah, this one, this is quite interesting. This is quite balanced because there's a wee bit of everything going on with this New England IPA. So as I've said before on the channel, for me there are 6 elements to think about when it comes to this style. So the first one would be the sort of yeasty, the farmhousey yeasty kind of character. The next one would be the sort of rye and grainy side of things, although those two components are a bit more prominent when it comes to American brewed New England IPAs. But then you've got the wheaty bitiness, the barley malt bread, the oaty creaminess, and also the sweeter side of things. But quite often these beers will show you elements of everything. This one certainly is doing that. This is one of the most kind of diverse and kind of complex aromas I can think of that we've had from Fermenterarna in the IPA category. So this should be quite interesting. Yeah, on first impression, this is one of the more kind of yeasty and slightly farmhousey leaning New England IPAs. I do wonder if this one's got a little bit of rye or something like that in it. That would be quite interesting. But certainly it's got quite a lot of grainy and farmhousey character to it on the first impression. The green component is quite bright, which is fairly common for the style. And you've got that big juicy fruity character coming out of this one. Yeah, this is a really interesting aroma, and as I say, quite different from what we've had from Fermenterarna in the past. But I like it for sure. Quite a lot of oaty character to this one. So yeah, interesting stuff. I'm curious as to whether this has got a bit of rye in it. It doesn't say anything though. It says just barley malt, wheat malt and oats. So yeah, interesting. So let's try and break this aroma down a wee bit more and just describe it for you more in depth. So I'm getting quite a lot of oat out of it the more that I smell of it, to be honest with you. It almost smells a little bit like an oat cream New England IPA. So yeah, backbone of the beer for sure. You've got a nice little bit of, you do have a really nice little bit of kind of fresh, white bready bread crust in this beer. That forms the backbone of the beer. There's a little bit of a kind of woody element to it as well, but I actually get quite a lot of Jacob's cream cracker out of this beer, and that's what's given me a lot of the, that really is what's given me a lot of the kind of dryness that the beer has, and a bit more of the graininess too. So for me, that's really quite interesting. So yeah, that's a fresh white bready bread crust, a bit of Jacob's cream cracker on top, a little bit of woodiness. Then there's a lot of bread in this one, absolutely. So getting a little bit, there's a tiny little bit of that wholemeal brown bready character in there, but there's also a really nice there's also a really nice little bit of kind of, how do we say that? The brown bread almost just has this little bit more kind of dryness and crispiness to it as well, which is quite interesting. But then you've got all the kind of fluffy, fresh white bread on top of that. And you can smell the wheat in this one too. There's a bit of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose in there, but you can really smell the wheat kind of smoothing out and thickening out the malt base in this beer. So that gives the bread a good little bit of kind of density at the same time as being quite airy. Then you've got the big oaty creamy notes to the beer too. What I will say about this one is that with the oats you can smell that it's not in its freshest condition, and that's my fault because I was travelling and so on, reviewing this one for you in later December. So yeah, this beer is not in its absolute prime condition, but knowing Fermenterarna, and you know, considering the fact it's a double IPA, it probably will have held up pretty well actually. So yeah, for me, the oaty character you get in this one, you do get quite a lot of the creaminess out of it. You can still smell that creamy porridgey sort of thing, but the oats do have quite a little bit of dry character to them. And I've said this in reviews many a time before as well. For me, the oats in a New England IPA are a good indicator of how fresh the thing is. The drier the oats are, the older the beer is, the creamier they are, the kind of younger the beer is. But this beer still has a bit of mixture of both, to be honest with you. So I'm guessing it might be like 6 weeks or 2 months old. This is one of the problems with the Systembolaget system. It's difficult for breweries to plan and have enough time to sort of, you know, meet the Systembolaget deadlines, but also get the beers into Systembolaget fresh actually. So yeah, the aroma that you get on the malty side of things with this beer is really kind of oaty, but quite a bit of dryness from the oats. I get a little touch of the Werther's original butter candy butterscotchy thing, which is understandable when you consider that this beer is a New England double IPA. There's also a little bit of biscuit in there. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, though, the green component, little tiny touch of earthiness, but not overly much. That's most likely to come from the T90 side of things, I would say, rather than the cryo. But the green component for me is quite smooth and quite oily. You've got a nice floral brightness in there, and you've also got that you know, you also have that lovely kind of grassy type note to this beer as well, which is interesting too. But the green component for me is actually quite soft and things in this, and I think that's probably down to the presence of cryo hops. They often give you that kind of big just smoothness and oiliness to your green component actually, and there's a lot of that going on in this beer. So yeah, on the fruity side of things then, let's have a wee look at this. On the fruity side of the beer, it is kind of what you'd expect if you know these two hops. It's very, very tropical and at the same time very, very smooth. So I do get a little bit of passion fruit out of this beer for sure. So there's a nice little bit of passion fruity pungency in there. You've got a big juicy mango quality for sure, and that's going to be from both hops. I think the more pungent passion fruit is going to be from Citra. The juicy mango is going to come from both. And underneath that, yeah, there's apricot and papaya. I think that's most likely to be coming from the Idaho 7. And there's also just I get quite a lot of juicy pineapple actually in the nose with this beer as well. And I think that again, that's most likely to be Idaho 7. But at the front of the nose, there is just a little bit of that citrusy, zesty character coming out of the beer. And I think that's most likely to be the Citra that is giving you that. Citra can give you a little bit of lemon limey character. I find that a bit more prominent in West Coast IPAs. Remember, different hops can behave differently depending on what malts and stuff you mix them with. But the fruity character coming out of this one is the fruity character that comes out of this one is really, on the citrus side of things, really shows you that little bit of zestiness, which is quite surprising. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is quite interesting, quite smooth and juicy, I have to say. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck in. You can always get some really interesting notes out of these, of course. But let's put the rest of this beer into the glass and we'll have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Burrito Burrito, a New England hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Fermenterarna in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. To say, Pretty nice beer, this one, actually. This is one of these ones where the aroma and the flavour that you think you're going to get don't match up so well with what you actually get out of it. This is quite a wee bit sweeter in its malt base than I was thinking it was going to be. But to be honest, when I think about the colour of this one, it sort of makes sense that the colour of this beer is obviously a little bit darker and not as bright and yellow, I guess we could say, as a number of the Fermenterarnas we've had before. So it makes sense from that perspective, but it didn't show up as being overly sweet in the aroma, which is interesting. So yeah. Yeah, definitely like how this beer goes about its business. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. But for just as a first impression, very oaty leaning, slightly sweet, creamy New England IPA. Green component builds a little bit, gives you a wee bit of bitterness into the aftertaste, but overall is quite smooth. Then you've got these lovely juicy tropical fruit notes coming out of this one. So yeah, I do like how this goes together. But let's try and break the flavour of this beer down a wee bit and just describe it more in depth for you. So, middle third of your palate then. Backbone of the beer, you've got a lovely little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust. That just forms the backbone of the beer. On top of that, absolutely some Jacob's cream cracker, and toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you do get just a little touch of woodiness in there, which I really quite like. So yeah, the backbone of this beer is really nice, but on top of that, as I say, you get these lovely kind of bready notes out of it. So the base, above that kind of crackery note, you start to get that fluffy, fresh, white bready character from the barley malt, and you can feel there's just a more dense layer sitting above that, which is of course your wheat. And the wheat really acts as quite a smoothening, really acts as a very smoothening force in this beer, I guess we could say. But I like that. I certainly do like that. Yeah. So, on the on top of the smooth wheaty there, you start to get the oats out of this beer. And like I said, for me, this is it really is quite an oaty leaning New England IPA rather than anything else. But yeah, the oats in this beer, and the thing is too, this does actually hold up quite well. I do suspect this beer is maybe about 6 weeks, 2 months old, something like that, because you can just smell it in the aroma. But yeah, the oaty character in this beer doesn't really give it away in that sense. On top of the wheaty layer, if you go down the middle line of your the middle line of your palate, you can feel there's that big creamy oaty character in there, and as you move out toward the edges of your palate, you can feel the oats get a little bit drier. But as I say, it would really not surprise me if this was an oat cream New England double IPA. Yeah, just quite curious of that. Very, very creamy oaty character, this one. But as you move out toward the edges of your palate, with this beer on the top layer, there is a little bit of just drier oaty notes. But in the dead centre of that middle third of your palate, you get that sweet butterscotchy, butter candy quality coming out of the beer. So yeah, the way that goes together is really nice. Just butterscotchy, butter candy note, and as you move further out toward the edges of the palate there, you've got a bit more of that kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sweetness coming out of it as well. So yeah, I think the way this beer goes together from that perspective is really quite nice. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that particular regard. So yeah, I think there's nothing else we really need to say about the middle third of the palate in this beer. It's, as I say, big, smooth, kind of porridgey, oaty creaminess, and it's quite a sweet leaning New England double IPA, this one, compared to others that I've had actually. So let's go on to the back third of the palate then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate. Again, you get a bit of that soft, white bready build up there, and then the back third of your palate has the same kind of layers in the middle third of the palate. So yeah, a little bit of kind of fresh, kind of bread crusty base. On top of that, you get a bit of the cracker again, but these two layers are a little bit drier, of course. Remember, more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palate. Above that, though, fluffy white bready notes coming out of the beer. Yeah, fluffy white bready character in there. Then above that, that I will point out, that layer is significantly taller, of course, but then above that, you get the wheaty layer, the more dense wheat layer, and that on the back third of the palate is certainly a little touch more kind of spicy and things. So yeah, the way that goes together is quite interesting. And above that layer, you start to get some of the more yeasty qualities out of the beer. So let's just take a wee look at that. So yeah, there is a more, as I say, you get that more airy, farmhousey, bready character coming out of the beer. And for me, it's like a really light, just airy, slightly woody bread, but it's also got a little bit of like a honeycomb type flavour above the kind of wheaty, bitey layer there. So yeah, I like that, and I do like how it goes together. So the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is definitely taller. And as you move forward into the middle third of your palate, you can feel the flavour just kind of condensed, the flavours just condensed down a wee bit and squashed together that little bit more. So that's really interesting, this one. The malty side of this beer, though, as I say, lots of oats, good little bit of barley malt, and it's also got a sweeter component to it as well. Let's focus on the hoppy side of this beer. So with this one, in the back corners of the palate, the green component first, you do get a nice little bit of earthiness coming out of the beer. As you move further forward, though, it's a little bit floral, and as you push, well, so it's a little bit herbal, I would say, actually. So earthy, herbal, and then as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you get more of that floral aromaticity. And you can definitely tell that you do get a little bit of bitterness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste you go. But the green component in this beer is really quite oily and quite smooth in a sense. So yeah. And I think, yeah, the floral, the sort of smooth but slightly spicy floral notes you get out of this beer, I think are down to the use of the cryo hops in this one. Cryo for me just always comes across as really oily in the green component, and you certainly pick that up in this beer. But like I say, it gets progressively more bitter the further into the aftertaste that you go. Round the front curve of the tongue, though, you get a little bit of lighter grassiness in there. There's a wee touch of zestiness and stuff. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense is quite interesting, actually. I really like that. So a big thumbs up to Fermenterarna for the green component in this one. It complements the rest of the beer quite well. Just that little bit of bitterness contrasts the overall sweetness of the malt base. But let's look at the front third of the palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, a little bit of bready build up in there. The base of the front third of your palate, little touch of bread crust and cracker, and a smooth oaty note in there. Then above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. The fruity notes that you get in this one do actually agree, if you like, with the aroma. So yeah, this is interesting. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer is absolutely more tropical rather than anything else. So So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, you do get some of the it's interesting because at the back of that front third of your palate, you get some of the pungency of the Citra coming out of this one. There is a little touch of that stronger grapefruit in there, and as you move further forward, it's got more of a kind of passion fruity type quality. So yeah, bit of grapefruit, bit of passion fruit. Then as you move further forward from that, you've got this big, juicy, but slightly oily, mango-y character out of this one. And then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you can feel the soft sort of apricot and papaya notes underneath, the juicier pineapple on top. And then just as you reach the kind of front tip of your tongue, you get a bit of the lemon limey character that you would associate with Citra. Although, and for me, this is interesting that it shows it in here, because I would normally associate the lemon limey character or even lychee notes that you get from Citra. I would associate that more with it when it's used in West Coast IPAs than New England. So this is quite an interesting turn of flavour in this beer for me. But yeah, the way that Citra goes together, I think, is really quite nice actually in this one, and it works well with the Idaho 7. Citra Idaho 7. It's an interesting one. Mosaic Idaho 7 is always a good combination. Sabro Idaho 7, having that orangey, citrusy side and the tropical side of things is quite a good contrast. Yeah, Citra Mosaic in the old days now, but yeah, then Sabro and Idaho 7 in the more kind of modern times is always an interesting combination. But yeah, putting Citra and Idaho 7 together is quite an interesting thing to do as well. But yeah, this gives you a very kind of oily, tropical side to the beer, and I think it works well. But that little bit of lemon limey character works well with the grassy edge of the palate that you have too. So yeah, I like how this one, I do like how this beer goes about its business actually, so it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think we can move on to the mouthfeel just to round off this review then. So I would say that this beer is quite, for me it's actually pushing bottom end to full bodied, top end to mid bodied, bottom end to full bodied. The carbonation is very smooth in this one. It does show you a little bit of that typical Swedish cleanliness or cleanness, I guess, yeah. You can definitely feel a little bit of the cleanliness to the mouthfeel in this one. But at the same time, this is a big, thick, creamy, oat creamy New England IPA. And I like that about it. In terms of its IBUs, I think it's a standard 30, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was a little bit more than that and it was 40, because the bitterness does build up the further into the aftertaste that you go with this one. But yeah, the malt base, as we said, lovely bit of graininess underneath, some smoothness and thickness in the middle, then a bit of sweetness on top. And then you've also got that kind of tropical, fruity, juicy character too. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really quite interesting. And this has been quite a bit different from the other Fermenterarna IPAs that I've had in the last 2 months or so. We have had a couple of sweet ones from them before, and they've always been really interesting. But this one, I do really quite like it. So yeah, this beer gets a big thumbs up from me. I have enjoyed trying this one, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. But of course, knowing Fermenterarna, they will play around with it and give us a couple of more New England IPAs within the next month or two. So we'll keep an eye on those. Hopefully there's some more sour beers to come as well. But yeah, it's always nice to try the new things that Fermenterarna are releasing. But this particular beer was the Burrito Burrito, a very oaty and sweet and kind of oily and tropical New England double IPA this time. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the very near future. But until the next time, Slange it, Skull. Cheers. Check out my social media, check out Fermenterarna's social media. Have a go at this beer if you like a sweeter and creamier New England double IPA. So until the next time, Slange it, Skull. Cheers. See you in the next review. This was the Burrito Burrito from Fermenterarna in Hisingen, Gothenburg, here in Sweden.